3 men were thrown out of a castle window. Not a ground floor window, a window in a castle tower, 70 feet above the ground, high enough that the outcome should have been obvious. They landed, and they walked away. This is Prague, May 1618. What you are about to watch unfold started in that room with that fall and ended 30 years later with 8 million people dead across Europe. The survival is where the story begins, because what happened after the fall depended entirely on which answer you believed, and both sides needed a different answer very badly. Prague Castle. The smell of wood smoke and cold stone. A formal meeting, arranged weeks in advance, between a group of Protestant noblemen and 3 Catholic royal officials, 2 senior governors, and their secretary. The Protestants believe the officials have been quietly dismantling a written guarantee of religious freedom. The meeting is framed as a hearing. The verdict, in practice, is already decided. The 2 governors are condemned, their secretary alongside them. All 3 are carried to the window. One of the governors manages to grab the sill. He is pried loose. Then all 3 go over. The drop is documented in multiple contemporary accounts. Czech, Habsburg, and Vatican sources all confirm the height and the survival. What they disagree on is the cause. The 3 men fell onto the sloped earthworks of the castle's defensive moat below. The angle, and whatever had accumulated there over years of use, likely broke the impact. 1 governor was injured, the other 2 were shaken but mobile. Within hours, all 3 had been helped to safety. Catholic accounts spread fast. Angels, some writers suggested. Divine protection. Prints were made. Pamphlets circulated across Habsburg territories within days. 3 men condemned by heretics, preserved by God. Protestant accounts were blunt. They landed in the garbage. The phrase circulated just as quickly, with just as much intention. No miracle, no angels, just physics and luck. The secretary was eventually ennobled by the emperor for surviving. His new title? Von Hohenfall, of the High Fall. The empire made the miracle official. But here's the thing. Whether God caught them or a dung heap did, the men who survived the fall were already irrelevant to what happened next. At this point, this is still a local crisis. What it becomes is something else entirely. To understand what the window unlocked, you need to understand what people in Bohemia believed was being taken from them. For decades, Bohemia had been a Protestant majority region ruled by Catholic Habsburg emperors. That arrangement had held, imperfectly, with constant friction, because of a written charter. A formal, signed guarantee of religious freedom that the Protestant nobility had extracted from the emperor in 1609. That document was the agreement. If you have that piece of paper, you have protection. If someone starts quietly dismantling it, you have nothing. The men who organized the confrontation in the chancellery believed the dismantling had already begun. A new emperor was coming, Ferdinand, more aggressively Catholic than anyone who had ruled before him. And the Protestant nobility believed that when he took the throne, the charter would not survive. The window was not an act of rage. It was a statement. And it was a deliberate reference to history. Over a century earlier, Bohemian reformers had thrown Catholic officials from a Prague town hall window in a moment of similar crisis. The gesture already had a meaning. This is what we do when legal remedies are gone. Thurn, the nobleman who led the confrontation, knew exactly what he was doing. By the time the men hit the ground, this was already bigger than them. What he could not have known was what he had just started. This is where things change. What happened in that room was supposed to send a message. It didn't. It sent something much bigger. The Bohemian Protestant nobility formally declared that Ferdinand could not be their king. They needed someone else. They found a Protestant candidate, a young German prince, and offered him the Bohemian crown. He accepted. He arrived in Prague with his wife, was crowned, and began his reign. He would hold the throne for 1 winter. Ferdinand, now Holy Roman Emperor, mobilized everything available to him. A Catholic coalition assembled across the continent. They moved into Bohemia with overwhelming force. The battle, when it came, lasted 2 hours. The Protestant army collapsed. The new king fled the country with his wife before the smoke cleared. 27 Protestant leaders were executed in Prague's central square the following June. Some beheaded, some hanged. Their heads were mounted on the Charles Bridge and left there for 10 years. Bohemia was forcibly re-Catholicized. The charter, the written guarantee that had started all of this, was destroyed in a formal ceremony. Ferdinand tore it apart with his own hands. Up to this point, this was a local crisis. After this, it becomes a European war. Other powers had been watching. Denmark entered the war, concerned about Habsburg expansion to its south. Sweden entered after Denmark failed. France entered. And this is the part that reveals what the conflict had actually become. Catholic France, backing Protestant forces. Because this was no longer about religion, it was about who was going to control the shape of Europe. The war moved across the continent. Germany bore the worst of it. By the time a peace agreement was finally signed in 1648, 30 years after the window, an estimated 8 million people were dead. From combat, from famine, from the diseases that follow armies. Some regions of the Holy Roman Empire lost 1/3 of their population. Some lost more. Villages emptied, fields burned and were not replanted. The wreckage was visible for a generation. A window opened. Europe broke. All of it running in a direct line of cause and consequence back to a May afternoon in Prague Castle, 1618. Thurn spent years fighting the war he helped ignite. He led armies, lost armies, was exiled, negotiated, returned. By the time the war ended, he was in his 70s, living outside the country he had risked everything to defend. Bohemia had been re-Catholicized. The charter was gone. The window had not saved what it was thrown to protect. Thurn threw 3 men from a window to force a decision. He got one, just not the one he thought he was making. He died in 1640, 8 years before the peace. 3 men were thrown from a window as a statement. They survived through luck, or grace, depending on your answer, and both sides used the survival to confirm what they already believed. The Catholics said God was with them. The Protestants said the miracle was nothing. Both sides went to war certain they were right. Wars fought with that certainty tend not to end quickly. They tend not to end cleanly, and they tend not to end with the outcome anyone in the room was planning for. The window was not the cause of what followed. It was the moment a system under pressure for decades finally found a crack. When systems like that break, they don't break small. They didn't die when they hit the ground, but something else did. Prague, 1618. A window, a fall, a war that consumed a generation. All of it driven by the belief that what was happening had a meaning, that survival was a sign, that God was choosing sides. Not every story about bodies works that way. Some are simpler. Next on Lore&Ruin. In Edinburgh, in 1827, 2 men made a much simpler calculation. The anatomy schools needed bodies, the cemeteries had them, and the gap between those 2 facts turned out to be a business opportunity. William Burke and William Hare didn't start with murder. They started with a corpse that was already there, and a question. What is this worth? Subscribe and you'll be there when it drops.